Adam Peters is a St. Pete native. He was born here. I love what he says. He was born here, built here, and fully invested in what this city becomes. That's what we need, right? Adam's connection to mental health is deeply personal. The loss of his sister lit a fire in him, and it was a commitment to show up for the people the way he wished others and the world had shown up for his sister. As a professional motivational speaker and trainer, Adam works with the city of St. Petersburg, mission-led organizations, nonprofits to both inspire and motivate lasting change, two very critical things. He carries a bold mission to make St. Petersburg one of the most positive places on the planet to live, to work, and belong. Friends, will you join me in welcoming Adam for his talk today, Build Hope on Purpose. All right. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much,
Yes,
Reverend
sir.
Bob. Really appreciate that very, very warm welcome. When I was a kid, it was my greatest desire to grow up and become a Ninja Turtle. I believed in this dream so much that I pestered my parents until they enrolled me into a local dojo, which also happened to be the Gulfport Rec Center. Much to my surprise, this was not part of the vision. My parents did not just enroll me, they enrolled themselves and my sister. Now, my parents got to yellow belt. That's the belt that comes right after white. My sister made it a little bit further, I think because she liked to break boards. When we were kids, my sister and I spent long summers playing board games, learning the afternoon thunderstorm schedule, and making our own fun around the neighborhood. Sometimes that involved trying to build an unsanctioned campfire in the backyard. But it was the 90s, the internet hadn't come out yet, there was not much to do, you gotta cut us some slack on that one. As a kid, my sister was vibrant and sharp and funny. She called herself the crash test dummy because she was the older sibling, and she got to make all the mistakes first, then I got to learn from those mistakes and mostly avoid them. That is the benefits of being an older or younger sibling. We lost our absolute minds over digipets. Do you remember those? Those little keychain digital creatures that you had to remember to feed and interact with? They were all the rage and only slightly traumatizing when they didn't make it. At Christmas time, my sister taught me how to peel back the corner of the wrapping paper to get a peek of what was inside. And together we begged my mom to make the hot chocolate in the little ceramic pitcher because it felt extra Christmassy. As we got older and moved into young adulthood and our landscapes changed, I became a little bit more withdrawn for my own reasons. And my sister's vibrancy faded, and in its place it was judgment, mostly of herself, but also this bitter cynicism that does not belong in anybody that vibrant, that sharp, that alive. You're all here this morning because you believe that people need support when they are struggling the most. You're here because this organization has done something remarkable, and you want to be a part of it. I am so grateful to be in this room with you, and I do not take lightly that you showed up today. What I'm going to share with you is deeply personal, but it's also universal. Does anybody here suffer from the moderate to severe occasional negative thought? Just by a show of hands. I hear a lot of chuckles. That sounds like pretty much everybody, right? That's pretty universal. What about negative motivation? Does anybody negatively motivate themselves with things like, I'm not living up to my potential, I need to do more, I'm not doing enough? Anybody do that? Yeah, it's a lot of hands. 2 hands in some cases. This is the question I would like you to sit with as we spend time together today. What is the difference between you this morning and those occasional negative thoughts and my sister, whose negative thoughts became so severe and so pervasive that she ultimately chose to end her life last year? Or what is the difference between you and my maternal grandfather, who made that same choice a generation before my sister did? Or what is the difference between you and the 50,000 people a year in this country who are choosing to end their own lives? A number that is sadly going up, not down. Hope. The difference is hope, but maybe not the kind that you're thinking of. The kind of hope that I'm talking about is the kind of hope that you build on purpose, deliberately, and sometimes in the hardest season of your life. Before we're done, I'm going to share with you every single thing that you need to get started to build hope on purpose. Because that is why we are here today, to build hope on purpose. My friends, can you say that with me? Why are we here today? To build hope on purpose. Thank you. Now, if the opposite of hate is love, then I think the opposite of fear must be hope. And I heard an idea once that stopped me in my tracks. That hope is stronger than fear, leagues stronger. But fear is far easier to evoke. Now, as we all exist here in the year of 2026, I think we have plenty of evidence that that idea is true. And I don't even need to elaborate. Every single person in here knows in their bones from the last decade of being alive that it is far easier to evoke fear than hope. But why? Why is that? There's two reasons, I think. And the first one is scientific. Our survival for millennia has depended on our ability to detect threats. A snake in the grass, a rival with dangerous intent, scarcity of resources. Our abilities to detect threats is what has earned us our top spot here on this planet. And not only are we good at spotting danger, we are very good at proactively addressing it. That snake in the grass, we neutralize or we get away. That rival, we outwit them or we retreat to safety. Scarcity of resources, we beg, borrow, steal, adapt, move on. Fear plus action is what has created the world that we exist in today. Does it work? Yeah, for survival. Does it render the best results? No. And we know that in our bones too, and yet here we are. And on top of that, our fear-based responses are getting worse. Human beings, biologically identical to you and me, have been roaming this planet for 300,000 years. All with negativity bias in play, all working from this fear-based template. That is a very, very, very long time. Now consider this. The smartphone was released about 20 years ago. By our modern standards, it's finally old enough to vote, but not legally order a drink. By our long weaving thread of human history, it is a newborn. And yet this newborn, paired with the internet, has done something that no other technology has ever done before. It has put every problem, every disaster, every catastrophe, every outrage-generating piece of news directly into our pockets. Always within reach, our constant companion. Negativity is the ultimate attention grabber. And nobody knows this better than the folks whose incomes depend on your clicks and your screen time. So they leverage that already existing negativity bias in your head to capture your attention, and then they manufacture more outrage, more catastrophe. At a size, a volume, and scale that our ancient threat-detecting brains are not equipped to keep up with. And then it gets injected directly into your bedroom, at the dining room table, into your palm at 3 a.m. when you cannot sleep. More outrage, more worry, more. Is it any wonder that 50,000 people a year in this country are choosing to end their lives? That's 137 people a day. 137 people having families having the worst day of their lives, finding their loved ones, getting that dreaded phone call. So yes, it is harder than ever to access hope right now. But that is precisely why it is so important to build hope on purpose, deliberately, as an act of will, to be as proactive about hope as we are with fear. And the great news, you already have every single thing that you need to do just that. You just might not have been thinking about it this way. Because hope isn't something that happens to us, it is something we build. The other reason I think that hope is harder to evoke than fear is because there's two kinds of hope. Hope is a noun and hope is a verb. Most of us are only familiar with hope as a noun. Something outside of us, inert, passive, a wish for something good to happen. Hope it doesn't rain this weekend. I hope things get better. I hope that someone does something about that. You know, I bought my house here in St. Petersburg about 14 years ago. It sits on a corner lot, and on the street side, there's some bushes. Shortly after moving in, I noticed that my bushes were being used as the neighborhood trash can. People were just chucking their garbage in there. And do you know what I did when I realized that was happening? Absolutely nothing. I shook my head and I thought to myself, I hope that someone does something about that. So can you imagine what was still in my bushes years after moving into my house? Yeah, garbage. It took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to realize, wait a minute, I'm someone. I'm the someone that can do something about that. Now, me being me, I didn't stop with just my bushes. I, in fact, put together an entire trash gathering rig, complete with a sling that I could clip the can onto, a sun hat, gloves, those grabbers so I didn't have to bend over. And I popped in earbuds and I just listened to an audiobook and walked around the neighborhood picking up garbage. And do you know how I felt when I came home with an overflowing trash can? I felt good, really, surprisingly good. And you know there's a reason for that. Researchers who study neuroscience have found that anxiety and gratitude cannot exist in the brain at the same time. They compete. When you choose to take action, you're getting dopamine. When you're stressed and you choose to do nothing, you're getting steeped in cortisol. So by literally choosing to do anything, something, over literally nothing, you are changing your brain chemistry. And my neighbors started to notice. When I was out walking with my trash can, they'd start to wave at me, and some of them would call, "Thank you." I even started to see some of my other neighbors picking up trash as well. One person taking one small action, creating a ripple effect. That is hope as a verb. Because why are we here, my friends? To build hope on purpose. I want to tell you a little bit about my sister, Shindella, who also went by Shay. She was born 2 years and 1 day before me. So she always kind of held a little bit of a grudge about me stealing her birthday thunder, which fair enough. I get that. She was one of the funniest people that I have ever known. And not the kind of funny that tries, the kind of funny that just is. She had this uncanny ability to see to the heart of something, see the absurdity, and then say aloud what the rest of us were thinking. She loved Star Wars and her cats and a good back and forth turn of phrase. When we were kids, one of her favorites was "See you later, alligator," "In a while, crocodile." And then later in life, she coined this one: "Where there's a will, there's a Shay." Pretty clever, right? And it was very true. She was a very, very, very determined person when she wanted to be. The challenge was what she was most determined, what she wanted more than anything was escape from the physical and emotional pain, from the traumas that she experienced that too many people in this world experience. Early on, she used substances to escape. And throughout her entire life, food was her single source of happiness, which backfired immensely because it resulted in a debilitating binge eating disorder and morbid obesity that added to the physical pain that she felt in every waking moment of her life. So she used sleep to escape when she got off the drugs. And she used isolation to escape. And I think one of the hardest things for her was she was painfully self-aware. She knew there was something that wasn't serving her, her behaviors, her thoughts. So she went to all of the doctors and all of the therapists and took all of the medications she was prescribed. She joined support groups and communities that for brief stretches of time did allow her to thrive. And I met many of those community members at her memorial, and they all told me that she was a valued and important part of those communities. But setbacks were my sister's kryptonite. And every time a setback happened, it triggered a spiral that ended in the same inevitable conclusion that she did not want to be here anymore. Here's what I've come to understand about what was happening inside my sister. When the fear state is relentless, when you are locked in to threat detecting mode with no way out, everything about your world narrows. Options disappear. Agency disappears. The big picture disappears. That is not a weakness. That is not a character flaw. That is what an unregulated nervous system looks like from the inside. And sometimes the lock is biological and runs very deep. Setbacks were my sister's kryptonite, and there was no bigger setback than the COVID shutdowns. That was the beginning of the end for my sister. Communities that had been sustaining her vaporized. Therapy went online, flat and impersonal, and food was delivered at the tap of a button. The structures that had been holding my sister up crumbled one by one, and all of a sudden it was as if nothing that me or my family could do could stop the inevitable downfall. Now, my experience during those COVID years was entirely different. Not because I'm stronger than Shay, because I'm not. It's because I stumbled into a series of small actions that pushed me out of fear and into something different. Something that improbably felt like forward momentum. When I found out that people my age were dying of COVID, something inside of me cracked open. And I asked myself a question that I hadn't allowed myself to sit with before that very moment. And the question was this: if I died tomorrow, which seems more likely than it did before the pandemic, am I happy with how I have lived my life? The answer was a very fast and a very forceful no. So that's when I put hope into action on my own behalf. I started learning about how my brain worked. I started learning about the techniques you can do to help yourself heal and change your thought patterns, and I started applying the things that I was learning. And then I started to see the pattern and the process that was working for me. So I wrote a book about it. I put a happiness installation in my front yard. I rebuilt my life around the people and the places and the communities that gave me strength and energy, rather than taking that strength and energy away. And through it all, I shared everything with Shay. We tried everything together and everything separately. And for a brief, breathtaking, ephemeral moment, she was engaged in a therapy that actually quieted the constant background noise of suicidal ideation that she had been living with since the age of 12. For weeks, she reported to her doctors and to our family that that thought loop had finally got quiet. I allowed myself to believe. But we know how this story ends. On January 6, 2025, my sister chose to end her life. She went out on her terms after doing everything that she could think of and was capable of doing. All that hope and action, and it still fell short. It was devastating, and it hurt, and it still does. But this is what I want you to hear. This is what I need you to hear, because I think this gets left out of the hope conversation. There will be times in life where you do everything right, and still the outcome that you were afraid of the most is the one that happens. Loss is real. Grief is real. Failure is real. But that is precisely why community is not optional. It is not an add-on to the hope conversation. Community is the safety net that will catch you and the people that you care about when hope does not work out the way that you planned. Within 24 hours of losing my sister, flowers arrived at my doorstep. Comforting and compassionate messages flooded in from people I hadn't heard from in years. A Toastmasters colleague showed up at my front door with a giant pan of the best pad thai I have ever tasted. Colleagues at work covered my responsibilities and they said, "Don't worry, we got you." That is community in action. Within 24 hours, I saw the effects. And I saw it through the summer as I stepped away from my life to figure out what it looked like without my sister in it, and friends and family opened their homes to me. This is what happens when you spend years converting hope as a noun into hope as a verb. Building relationships where people show up not because they have to, but because they want to. I could not have survived that first year without those people, and I am absolutely certain of that. Let me ask you something. How many meaningful relationships do you think a human being is capable of maintaining at any one time? Just take a guess in your head. Researchers who study human behavior have arrived at a number. It's called the Dunbar number. 150. That's it. 150 people. This is the size of communities that our brains evolved to exist in. Villages where everyone knew everyone. Where trust was built up over repeated contact. Where people showed up for one another because it was possible to know who needed showing up for. Now think about how many connections you have on social media. Think about the size of this city. Think about the scope and volume of the problems being broadcasted at you every single day. National, global, existential. We are trying to process a world of billions with brains wired for 150. No wonder we feel so overwhelmed. No wonder we don't know where to start. The answer isn't to go bigger. The answer is to go much, much, much smaller. To invest deeply in the people and the places that you can see with your eyes, that are within your reach. 3 years ago, I went back to my 150. That is when I created the Community Happiness Project. I call it an interactive art installation in my front yard, because I live on that corner lot. And I decided to do this during the COVID years because I realized I barely knew any of my neighbors. I had lived in that neighborhood for over 10 years. And then all of a sudden, I was there all the time and feeling kind of lonely. I wanted to do something for my neighbors that was an indicator that we need to return to our 150. We need to get to know each other again. And I wanted to delight them. I wanted to put something fun in their way. So I commissioned a 15-foot in diameter AstroTurf pad. And in the middle of this pad, my dad and my sister helped me erect a signpost. And the signpost has arrows pointing in all different directions to all places all around the world. At the very top of this signpost is the famous Gary King happiness sign with an arrow pointing down. My sister painted that arrow, by the way. And the idea is this: you don't have to go all across the world to find happiness. It's right here. We can build it, we can harness it, and we can take it with us anywhere that we go. There's also seating and a rocking chair. There's a trinket trade cabinet for our neighbors to interact that way. And we give out painted rocks. Most of these rocks are painted by me, my family, my mom, and my sister painted hundreds of happiness rocks before she left us. And we put them in a basket, and we have a little sign that encourages people to take one, take it home, put it somewhere you're going to see often. And when you catch sight of it, intentionally pause and reflect on the things that made you happy recently. And I hope one of those reflections is that they live in a neighborhood that has happiness rocks. But the idea is the more we can reinforce that positive mindset and thinking about the good things that are going on, the more we'll be able to build a strong community. And since the passing of my sister, the Community Happiness Project also has a wind phone. This is an old-timey phone I got on eBay. And the idea is it's connected to nothing but the wind. The idea is you pick up the receiver and you speak the words that you wish you could say to the person who is no longer here. And I like to believe those messages are carried on the wind and they reach the person they were meant to reach. It sounds small, right? And it is small. That's entirely the point. You know, I had a neighbor who moved in recently, and she made a point to come over and tell me that she bought her house not because it was the nicest one she looked at, because she looked at much nicer ones, and it's not because our neighborhood is the most polished, because it's not. She chose to buy that house because it was right across the street from the Community Happiness Project. And when she saw that installation, she knew this is a neighborhood where people care about each other. And then I think of Grant. I never met Grant. He just left a note in our guest book. And the words that I remember the most from what he wrote, he said that sometimes it's easy to feel like the world is out to get you. But places like this prove that's not true. He said to remember that every setback is a setup for a comeback. Small things compound. They always do. That, my friends, is building hope on purpose. Because why are we here? To build hope on purpose. Yes, my friends. I want to take a moment to name what is happening in this room right now. Every single one of you is here because someone asked you to show up. For people that you likely do not know, who are carrying a weight that you may never fully understand, and who are struggling to access care that you or I might take for granted. That, my friends, is hope as a verb. The First United Methodist Church of St. Petersburg, Florida, has been putting hope into action for generations in this community. The scholarship fund that we're supporting today provides access to people who might otherwise be sitting alone with thoughts as dark as my sister's. To trained, caring, compassionate, professional human beings who can help them find a better way forward. I've read the testimonials, and I hope you will too. As Reverend Bob said, they are all around the building. They are deeply touching. They are an indicator that this program is working and compounding. I read one that said that she started a nonprofit because she was so inspired by the help that she got that she wanted to pay it forward. That is hope in action. The funds raised at events just like this one last year raised enough money to support 607 sessions. Right? That's a great round of applause for you folks who have been supporting it, but on top of that, another 455 sessions were donated by this community of therapists who care far more about their clients' success than their ability to pay. I think that deserves a great round of applause as well. That's incredible. And when you're funding this scholarship program, you're not just funding a session. You're funding the possibility that someone in this city reaches their turning point. That someone finds their way back from the edge. That families do not get that dreaded phone call. That someone, unlike my sister, gets a second chance to believe that they can build hope on purpose with the help of their community. That is as hope in action as it gets. You're already doing the thing. You've already built the community. I'm just here to remind you of why that is so important and to invite you to keep going. I want to be very specific about the kind of hope in action, or hope as a verb, that I'm talking about. Because I think we have this tendency to make it this big, grandiose thing, larger than life, a reinvention. And okay, sometimes it does look like that. For me this past year, it did look like that, but hope as a verb is actually oftentimes much smaller than that. Sometimes it looks like hiding a folded paper swan that says "You matter" in an Easter egg, and then watching a gap-toothed little girl unfold that swan, look down, look up, and ask in her most serious voice, "Does this say that I matter?" And being able to say yes, because you do. Sometimes it looks like reaching out to a friend who you know is going through a hard time. Not because you have the perfect thing to say, who does? But because you want them to know that someone is thinking about them. Sometimes it looks like showing up to a fundraiser on a Saturday morning and writing a check for whatever it is that you can spare. None of these things will make the national news. None of them will go viral. But every single one of them is a deposit into a community that will catch you and the people that you care about when hope does not work out the way that we planned. Here's what I know for certain after living the hardest year of my life. It is not the size of the gesture that determines its impact. What determines its impact is that you just did it. That you chose action over inertia. That you chose connection over isolation. That you chose hope over fear. So today I'm asking you to do one thing, just one thing, something small, something you can do this week. Reach out to someone you know is carrying something heavy. Walk around your neighborhood and pick up the things that do not belong there. Introduce yourself to a neighbor you've lived next to for years and never actually met. Sit with someone who's grieving without trying to fix it. And of course, if it calls to you, make a gift to the people in this room who have built a community around the radical idea that everybody deserves support when they need it the most. My sister's name was Shindella. She went by Shay. She loved Star Wars and her cats and a good back and forth turn of phrase. She wanted to get better. She just ran out of runway to get there. I carry her into every single room that I walk into, and what I carry on her behalf is this: the world will keep being uncertain. There will be reasons, real and valid reasons, to be afraid. The news will not suddenly become cheerful. And the scale and scope of global problems will not shrink to a manageable size overnight. But my friends, you don't have to solve global problems. You just need to do one thing. You need to show up for yourself, or the person sitting next to you, or someone in this city who needs a reason to stay. Hope is not something that you wait for. It is not something that arrives from the outside, fully formed, ready to carry you. Hope is something that you build. one action at a time, one conversation at a time, one community at a time. Shay taught me that. And so did the people that showed up at my front door with food and flowers and presents when I needed it the most. You are those people for someone in this city tonight. So, my friends, build hope on purpose because your community needs you to. Thank you.